I never meant to stay past closing. The sign on the door of the little bookshop had flipped to closed an hour ago, and yet there I was, leaning on the counter with a half-finished cup of coffee, pretending to read the blurbs on a stack of used paperbacks. The truth was, I wasn't reading at all. I was listening. Her voice carried softly from the back office, low, even, steady. I'd worked under plenty of managers before, but the way she spoke made the air bend around her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. When she gave instructions, even the stubborn delivery guy found himself nodding along like a schoolboy. I told myself I stayed late to help with inventory. That was the excuse. But I knew better. When she finally appeared, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, I straightened too fast, knocking my coffee against the counter. It left a dark crescent mark that spread across the wood like a stain of guilt. She noticed. Of course she noticed. And for a second her eyes held mine longer than they should have. Not angry. Just sharp enough to pin me where I stood. "You can't stay here tonight," she said. Simple, firm. It should have ended there. I should have mumbled an apology, grabbed my bag, and walked out into the cool night. But instead, the words slipped out before I could stop them. "Then take me somewhere I can." The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd felt in years. She didn't laugh. She didn't scold me. She just let the words hang in the air, like a dare neither of us wanted to touch. My chest tightened, waiting for her to say something. Anything. But she only walked past me, switching off the row of hanging lamps until the room fell into soft shadows. I stood there, useless, caught between shame and something I couldn't name. My hand twitched at my side, as if reaching for a thought. "Finally," she said, "lock the door on your way out." Her tone wasn't unkind. It was careful, deliberate, as if she were choosing words that wouldn't open a door she wasn't ready to walk through. I watched her go, the click of her heels fading into the quiet. For a long time, I didn't move. The shop smelled faintly of old paper and lemon polish. The air so still I could hear the clock ticking above the register. My coffee had gone cold, but I held onto the cup anyway, just for something to do with my hands. There was nothing extraordinary about the moment. No grand confession, no cinematic thunderstorm outside. But it stayed with me. The way her eyes lingered a beat too long. The way her voice dropped lower than necessary. The way she didn't look back as she left. I should have walked away, left it at that. Instead, I found myself staring at the darkened doorway where she disappeared, my own words replaying again and again in my head. Not the part about staying, but the part that slipped out, the part one couldn't take back. "Then take me somewhere I can." Even now, I don't know if I meant it as a joke, or as the most honest thing I've ever said. Either way, it changed something I couldn't undo. 2 days passed before I saw her again. Not that I wasn't around. I came in, stocked shelves, checked inventory like usual. But she kept herself tucked behind the counter or in the back office, where paperwork stacked up higher than the books. When she finally asked me to help fix the old display case near the window, I jumped at it too quickly, blurting, "Of course," like I'd been waiting all week for her voice to land on me. The glass pane rattled loose as I crouched down with a screwdriver, pretending to focus. What I was really doing was stealing glances at her reflection in the glass. She stood a few feet away, arms folded, pretending to be invested in a spreadsheet but not turning the page once. Her distance wasn't cruel. It was protective, like she'd drawn a line in the air and dared me to notice. "Careful," she said finally, when the screwdriver slipped in my hand. The warning carried more weight than the slip deserved. I gave a sheepish laugh. "Guess I'm not great at delicate work." Her lips pressed together, almost a smile, but not quite. "You're too quick with your hands. That's the problem." She caught herself after saying it, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face. Her eyes dropped to the floor, and for a second I swore she regretted letting it slip. That pause, it did something to me. I tightened the last screw in silence, trying not to grin like an idiot. When I finally stood, I noticed the small things I hadn't before. The faint smudge of ink on her thumb. The way she rubbed the back of her neck when she thought no one was watching. Even the laugh, quiet, tired, unpolished, when she caught me struggling to get the glass to sit evenly. It wasn't the kind of laugh she gave customers. This one was softer, unguarded. You make it look heavier than it is, she teased, shaking her head. Maybe it just feels heavier, I muttered back, more to myself than to her. The words slipped between us like a secret. She didn't answer. Her eyes held mine for one suspended second, and in that pause, I caught something she probably didn't want me to see. The weariness in her shoulders, the crack in that confident exterior. And then it was gone. She stepped back, busying herself with a clipboard, shutting the door I had glimpsed behind her gaze. Still, I carried that moment like a spark in my pocket. Her laugh, her hesitation, the way she looked away just a beat too late. I knew better than to think it meant anything. But when I closed up the shop that night, I caught myself pressing my palm against the glass pane we'd fixed together, remembering the faint tremor in her voice when she told me to be careful. Something about that tremor felt more dangerous than any words we'd spoken. It was raining the night she asked if I could help close. Not a gentle drizzle, but the kind that turned the sidewalks into rivers and pressed traffic lights into watery smudges. The shop felt like a cocoon against the storm. The hum of the heater, the tick of the old wall clock, the muted thud of water against the windows. We worked in silence. She counted the register, I straightened the shelves. The rhythm of it should have been ordinary, but every sound felt amplified. The scrape of coins, the rustle of receipts, the way her sleeve brushed mine when we reached for the same stack of books. Neither of us moved back. For one long second, our arms stayed there, side by side, until she pulled away with the smallest of laughs. Not nervous, more like it caught her by surprise, and she wanted it dismissed before it grew teeth. "You're not very good at pretending you're not tired," she said, sliding a book into place without looking at me. I swallowed, unsure whether to answer. She wasn't wrong. My body ached, but exhaustion wasn't what weighed me down. It was the way her voice softened when the shop was empty, how her words landed differently when no one else was listening. "I don't mind staying late," I said finally. "Feels quieter, like the place belongs to us for a while." The us slipped out too easily. She froze just enough to let me know she heard it, then went back to her work. But the air between us changed, heavier, charged, as if one wrong word could make it break open. A sudden vibration cut through the quiet. Her phone lit up on the counter, unknown caller. She stared at it, lips pressed tight, not moving to answer. The ring filled the shop, louder than the rain. Finally, she turned it face down. "Some things don't deserve answers," she murmured, more to herself than to me. I wanted to ask who it was. I didn't. Instead, I picked up another book, holding it too tightly, wishing I could smooth the lines of tension from her brow. When the lights were finally dimmed, we both stood by the door, hesitant to leave. Outside, the storm was still fierce, the kind that made you think twice before stepping into it. "You'll get drenched," I said. She smiled faintly. "I've been through worse." I don't know what came over me, but I reached out, brushing my hand against her sleeve as if testing whether the distance between us was real or imagined. She didn't pull away. For a heartbeat. We just stood there, the storm battering the glass, the shop too warm, too close. I thought I might say something, confess what had been clawing at my chest since that first night. But then she moved. Not away, just enough to shift her weight, and the moment slipped. Her keys jingled in her hand as she turned the lock. "Good night," she said, soft but final. I stepped into the rain without an umbrella, my skin prickling, not from the cold, but from the ghost of her sleeve against my fingertips. The storm had passed, but the shop still smelled faintly of damp carpet and rain-soaked coats. It was late again, too late for us both to still be there, but neither of us said it. She was at the counter, scribbling notes on an order form that didn't need to be finished tonight. I knew, because I'd watched her cross the same line 3 times and tear the page out in frustration. I pretended to busy myself with the returns cart, stacking books I'd already shelved twice. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was a taut string pulled so tight I could almost hear it hum. Finally, she dropped her pen. The sound made me flinch. "This isn't normal," she said, her voice low but sharp enough to cut. I turned, unsure whether to play dumb or admit the thing I'd been circling for weeks. "What isn't?" She met my eyes, and there was no escaping it. "You staying here after hours. Me letting you. This, whatever this is, Her words trailed off like they didn't want to be caught in daylight. She looked away, pressing her fingertips to her temple, as though saying it out loud had cost something. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I didn't mean to make things complicated. But you did. Her laugh was brittle, not unkind, but tired. The laugh of someone who wanted to believe they were immune to this sort of thing. You're too young to know what kind of mess this becomes. The air between us was thick. I took a step closer without meaning to, books still in my hands, as if they were some excuse to move. You act like I don't understand, I said quietly. But you're here, too. You keep letting me stay. Her breath hitched, just slightly. That was the first crack. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The hum of the refrigerator in the break room filled the silence, steady and indifferent. She finally spoke again, softer this time. Do you ever stop and ask yourself why? I had. Every night. Standing outside her office door, walking home soaked through, lying awake with her voice circling in my head. I wanted to tell her that. I wanted to tell her everything. But the words got stuck. Instead, I said, because it doesn't feel like anywhere else I've been. She looked at me then, really looked, and something shifted. Not affection, not approval, just recognition. As if she saw the truth in what I said, and it scared her. The silence stretched, so long I thought she might walk out. Instead, she whispered, almost to herself, I don't know if I'm more afraid of you leaving, or of you staying. And in that moment, nothing had ever felt heavier. The next evening, the shop was almost empty when she called me into the back. Her desk was cluttered. Invoices, paperbacks, half a cup of untouched tea, but her phone lay in the middle like it didn't belong there. The screen was dark, though I knew she'd been staring at it for a while. Can you fix the lock on the supply cabinet? She asked, but her voice carried that distant echo I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant she wasn't really talking about the cabinet. I crouched down, fiddling with the latch, giving her space. That's when I heard the sound, the faint playback of a voicemail. Her phone had slipped against a stack of papers, pressing play. A man's voice filled the room, low and unsteady. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I shouldn't have left like that. I see you everywhere. Please, just call me back. She snatched the phone, stopping it mid-sentence, but the words were already lodged in the air between us. I froze, tools still in my hand, not daring to look at her. I'm sorry, I said, though I didn't even know what I was apologizing for. It's nothing, she answered too quickly. Her posture stiffened, as though bracing for impact. Old history. The latch clicked into place under my fingers, but I barely noticed. My chest felt tight. I wanted to ask who he was, what he meant to her, why his voice made her eyes dart away like that. Instead, I whispered, you don't have to tell me. Her shoulders eased slightly, but she still didn't look at me. He left when things got hard. Years ago. And yet, somehow, he doesn't let me forget it. She tried to laugh it off, but it wasn't a laugh. More like an exhale dressed up as one. I stood slowly, meeting her gaze at last. For the first time, I saw past the armor, the polished confidence, the sharp edges. What I saw instead was tiredness, and something even harder to name, the weight of being left behind. And I realized then, in a way that scared me, that my presence wasn't just pushing against some line of propriety. It was pressing against her history, her scars, the parts of her life she kept buried under routine. She turned away, gathering stray papers with hands that weren't steady. You remind me of him sometimes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then, after a pause, but you stay. The words rooted in me like a stone thrown into deep water. No grand gesture, no dramatic confession, just that. And suddenly, nothing between us was the same. The night it finally broke open, nothing dramatic happened. No storm, no phone call, no sudden confession. Just the two of us, lingering after hours again, both pretending we had more work to do. She sat on the counter, ankles crossed, flipping absently through a battered poetry collection. I was leaning against the shelf opposite, watching her lips move silently over words she wasn't really reading. The silence felt different now. Not strained, not guarded. Just full, like it could hold the weight of things neither of us had said. At some point, she closed the book and set it aside. Her eyes found mine, steady, unblinking. "We can't keep circling this," she said softly. My throat tightened. "I know." Her gaze drifted toward the darkened window, where our reflections hovered faintly against the glass. "It's not fair. To you. To me." But her voice faltered on the last word, and that falter was everything. I walked closer, slow enough to give her a chance to stop me. She didn't. When I was close enough, I saw the exhaustion etched in the corners of her face, the kind that comes from years of holding too much alone. And I wanted, more than anything, to take even a piece of it from her. "We don't have to name it," I whispered. "We just don't have to keep pretending." She let out a breath, shaky, half a laugh. "You're too young to understand what pretending costs." I shook my head. "Maybe, but I know what it feels like when something's real." Her eyes closed for a moment, as if she were bracing for the weight of those words. When she opened them again, she didn't argue. Neither of us moved to kiss or to cross some cinematic line. Instead, I sat beside her on the counter. The wood creaked under our combined weight. For a long time, we just sat there, shoulders brushing, breathing the same quiet air. At last, her hand shifted, slow, tentative, until her fingers found mine. Not interlaced, not desperate. Just there, skin to skin, enough to say what we couldn't. The world didn't tilt, the lights didn't flare. But something inside me settled, like a knot finally loosening. We stayed like that until the clock ticked past midnight. No promises, no declarations. Just silence, full and certain. When she finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "Then let's not say anything at all." And that was enough. It's strange, looking back now, how quiet the turning point really was. No fireworks, no declarations, just two people sitting on a counter after midnight, hands brushing like the smallest of accidents. But that moment reshaped me. I used to think connection came in big gestures, in words spoken out loud, in things you could point to and say, "That's when it happened." What she showed me was different. It was slower, harder to name. It was the kind of connection that grows in silences, in the pauses between sentences, in the way someone lets their guard slip for just 1 second and trusts you to notice. She didn't give me answers. She gave me something better, the truth of her. Imperfect, layered, tired, stubborn. And for the first time, I realized how much strength it takes to let someone close when you've spent years building walls. I won't pretend it was easy. There were days she pulled away, retreating into that careful distance she wore like armor. There were nights I walked home wondering if I'd pushed too far, or if she regretted letting me in at all. But every time, somehow, we found our way back to that quiet space where honesty lived. What I learned from her is that love, if that's even the right word, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's choosing to stay when leaving would be simpler. Sometimes it's silence that doesn't demand to be filled. Sometimes it's just the warmth of another hand when you're not sure you deserve it. She taught me that being seen is both terrifying and necessary. And maybe that's what we both were searching for all along. Not romance, not rescue, just recognition. I don't know where it leads. Maybe that's the point. Life doesn't always hand you neat resolutions, and not every story wraps itself in a bow. But I carry her with me. In the way I listen now, in the way I pause before speaking, in the way I let myself stay in moments I once would have rushed past. And if you asked me what changed in her, I'd say this. She stopped pretending she was untouchable. And that small shift felt bigger than anything either of us could have said out loud. So no, it wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. And maybe that's enough. If you've stayed with me through this, tell me, have you ever had a moment like that? One that didn't look like much at the time, but changed you all the same?